also one of the coldest times of the year here in the Adirondacks. The summit of Whiteface is like a frozen tundra right now. Earlier this week, the temperature was about negative 60 degrees up top, 80-mile-per-hour winds, but they gave me a really big jacket and a thermos, so I should be all set, at least for the next 20 minutes or so. I'm sure many of you may have driven up the Memorial Highway up Whiteface to the top. It's definitely one of the best views in the state. But there's a lot more going on here than just the view. There's actually a lot of really great science happening, and there's people that come up here all year round, brave the cold, the wind, all the frigid temps, the snow and ice, and they come up here in the name of science. And we're going to be talking to some of those people today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first guest here. It's Paul Casson from the Atmospheric Sciences and Research Center. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Rob.
Welcome to the summit of Whiteface.
Welcome to the summit of Whiteface.
Thank you very much. Can you explain a little bit of what you do up here? And I know it's kind of technical, so can you pretend that I'm a 7th grader?
Well, that shouldn't be too hard to pretend you're a 7th grader.
That's probably true.
We do a lot of environmental monitoring up here. We monitor trace gases, oxides of nitrogen, SO2, ozone, carbon monoxide. I collect partisol samples that they're filters that a known quantity of air is drawn across the filter each day, and the filters are sent down to the Department of Health in Albany.
Okay, like a 3rd grader.
So they're looking at what's in the air, and specifically the 2.5 micron particles that will lodge in your lungs that can travel halfway around the world, non-local sources of pollutants.
And where are these pollutants coming from?
They come from combustion from all over, and there's ways to tell where their origins. A lot of them come from power plants. A lot of power plant emissions have been reduced in recent years. The cloud water sampling that's done here by the Adirondack Lake Survey Corporation, I was part of that for many years, and the pH of the cloud water has improved greatly. It used to be that you'd get samples down in the 3s and even the high 2s in pH, and now you're getting them more in the 4s and 5s, which is close to where it should be.
So acid rain is decreasing a little bit in the Adirondacks.
That's correct. It's decreased substantially in the Adirondacks. That's not to say there's not still effects from acid rain that are lingering from leaching of cations. That recovery is still a long way off, but we've started down that road.
I hope all of you 7th graders are learning about cations in class. So, why is Whiteface such a good place to do this research? Why is this research station here on the top of Whiteface?
Well, one of the reasons is the same reason why you're doing a webcast here. We've got AC power, we've got a road, and we stand alone as a peak. Whiteface is air masses approaching from the west, where a lot of power plants are located. This is the first major uplifting that these air masses encounter. So when they hit Whiteface, the mountain, the topography lifts the air masses, the air cools and condenses, and that forms orographic clouds, and it also enables us to intercept those pollutants.
So this is the first major obstacle that weather from the west kind of intercepts.
That's correct.
All right, so I talked about the temperature being pretty cold earlier this week. What do you think what is the temperature now?
We're right around 20 degrees Fahrenheit right now. Earlier in the week we were 30 below, and we had winds over 80 miles an hour. So we had some pretty major wind chills to where we wouldn't be standing out here.
So it's pretty balmy right now.
Yes, for late February at almost 5,000 feet in the Adirondacks, this is pretty nice day.
So what's the coldest that you have ever experienced here at the summit of Whiteface?
Well, like I said, when we get down into the hyper cold, we don't like to take chances. My coworker Rich Brandt and I were up here with a 78-degree negative wind chill this year, kind of pushing the limits of machines. You know, if your snowmobile breaks down under those conditions, you better be ready to get yourself off this mountain.
I bet. So do you, how often do you come up here?
In the winter, we come up at least once a week. In the summer, I come up pretty much every day. Obviously, it's a lot more time consuming in the winter. It's a little bit more of an operation, but we need to make sure that other users of the facility, DEC, radio users, can get up here. So as you saw when we walked in the tunnel, I have to pump the tunnel out because moisture collects in there. We have to break the trail out, make sure that it's accessible by snowmobile, and make sure the elevator keeps working.
Which it did not work today, ladies and gentlemen. But so, you're braving the cold a lot. A lot of people are interested in how cold it is here. Have you ever been up here when it's been so cold that when you spit, it freezes before you hit the ground? Or before the spit hits the ground?
No, I haven't. I'm not sure if that's possible, Rob, honestly, but I have never witnessed that because your body is 98.6 degrees, so it'd have to be awfully, awfully cold.
All right. Sorry, kids. Well, being up here in the cold all the time, you must have some pretty good "it's so cold, ... jokes. Can you give me your best "it's so cold, ... Like, it's so cold, Paris Hilton was actually seen wearing clothes.
Boy, you really put me on the spot on that one.
It's so cold, a lawyer was seen with his hands in his own pockets.
It's so cold that I don't even want to be outside skiing.
Pretty good. All right, is there anything you want to, last comments before we move on?
Well, I'd just like to welcome people up to Whiteface. We've renovated the building in the last year. We're going to have more display renovations with the Wild Center people, and if you haven't been up to the summit of Whiteface in a while, it's changing, and we'd love to have you. So come on up, and if you'd like a tour, get in touch with me, and I can show you around.
All right, thank you very much, Paul. We'll bring you back on a little bit later on.
All right.
I'm going to bring on our next guest here. We talked a little bit about weather and how it's monitored here on the summit of Whiteface. Well, that's not the only thing that's monitored here. Underneath the snow right now, there's actually populations of some of the rarest plants in the state of New York. And someone needs to protect those plants. And that person is Julia Goren. Come on over here. Julia Goren from the Adirondack Mountain Club. Hi, Julia.
Hey, Rob. How's it going?
It's going very well. How about you?
Great. Toasty warm.
Me too, because of this gigantic jacket. So, can you explain for our viewers what kind of research you do up at the top of Whiteface or other mountains here in the Adirondacks?
Sure. So first of all, the Summit Steward program is up here to educate people about these alpine plants. So our job is to talk to people, to tell people about the ecosystem, and to remind them to help us protect these plants by staying on the rocks. And the research that we're doing is research that supports that. So we're interested in seeing how areas are recovering, where people are staying on the rocks and off of these fragile plants. We're also interested in seeing how the plant populations are changing over time.
Wow. So how many species, just to give some perspective here, how many species of plants are we talking about that are found in this type of environment?
So we have 27 rare, threatened, or endangered species. These are our real alpine, our Arctic alpine plants. And those are vascular plants. We also have a whole bunch of mosses and lichens that are rare or threatened or endangered plants as well. And in addition to that, we also have a bunch of plants that grow at lower elevations that can survive in some of the sheltered areas on the summit.
So I'm a plant, I'm an alpine plant. What do I have to deal with living in this type of environment?
Well, you have to deal with a pretty extreme environment. So first of all, you have to deal with the wind. And up here on Whiteface, there have been wind speeds recorded over 140 miles per hour. That's pretty strong. That's, stronger than a strong hurricane. So you have to be able to deal with average wind speeds that are going to be about 40 to 50 miles an hour, and those extreme gusts that are going to be even greater. You have to deal with a really short growing season. So up on the summits, we only have about 60 days frost-free. So that's much shorter than your average plant. Like your garden tomato is going to need more like 90 days before you're going to even start to think about seeing some fruit. So short growing season, strong winds. You have to deal with the fact that the soil up here is really poor. It's really just decomposing organic material. So it's very acidic. It's really about the same pH as lemon juice, and it doesn't have a lot of nutrients. So there's not a lot for the plants to get out of their soil. There's not a lot of nutrients available for them. And then they have to deal with the extremes of the wind and the cold. And then also the fact that when it's really, really sunny, it's really dry up here. There's no streams and there's no shade. So these plants have to deal with everything from desert-like conditions to the Arctic conditions that we're experiencing today.
So how do they deal with sunlight then?
So plants, the alpine plants have a special pigment in them, and that pigment is called anthocyanin. It's actually the same thing that makes apples red and beets purple. But in alpine plants, what it helps them to do, it actually acts as a sunscreen. So it does the same thing that sunscreen does for us. It protects them from harmful UV rays. In addition to that, the anthocyanin helps the plants on those cold days in June. Now it's hard for us to believe it, but we still get snow up on the summits in June. And the anthocyanin actually acts as an antifreeze at that time of year, allowing plants to photosynthesize when it's pretty cold.
So these plants have been around for thousands of years. They live in some of the harshest climates, environments that are known on this planet. And they have all these special things. Why can't they be like, you know, what up, normal plants? I got sunblock. I creep low to the ground. Why not take a season off and actually grow down slope where it's a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more moderate?
Well, that's a great question. As a matter of fact, these alpine plants are so adapted to their environment that they can't survive anywhere else. When experiments have been done taking these plants to lower elevations where there's a longer growing season, where the temperatures are warmer, the plants really just can't handle it. They're basically sprinters. They put all of their energy into growing in a really short window, and given a longer growing season, they just don't have the energy to sustain it.
Very interesting. So these plants, what are the plants doing right now? It's pretty tundra-like up here. What's happening with the plants?
So most of the alpine plants are hanging out underneath a thick blanket of snow. So I should mention, most plants are dormant in the wintertime. Alpine plants are certainly no exception to that. But underneath the blanket of snow that we see around us, it's about 26 degrees under there. So those plants have a pretty comfortable, constant temperature. So even though the temperature up here can fluctuate, you know, and we can see temperatures minus 30 with really strong wind chills, under the snow, they're pretty well protected. Now, some of these plants are in areas where it's so windy that the snow is going to be scoured away. And those plants adapt to that by staying really low to the ground, which is something that most alpine plants do in general. They're low to the ground, they're aerodynamic, and that means that they're protected, so they're not going to break off and fly away in the wind.
So you spend majority of the year hiking up these high peaks and monitoring these plants and protecting these plants. What are you protecting these plants from?
So I spend the majority of the year talking to people, because the number one thing that threatens these plants is actually hikers. These plants have been here for the last 10,000 years, and they can adapt. I mean, they can withstand the extremes of the environment without a problem. But they're living at the southern extent of their range. It's a pretty stressful environment, and human footsteps are just a little bit too much more stress for them. So my job is to talk to people and just remind them to stay on the rocks and off of the plants, because plants can survive just fine on their own. They just can't survive that added burden of being stepped on.
You hear that, kids? Adults, stay off the plants. Keep your dogs off the plants, right?
Yeah.
No dogs? Maybe we should say that in French. There's a lot of French Canadians up here, right?
S'il vous plaît, marchez seulement par le rocher parce que les fleurs et des herbes sont très fragiles. Merci.
Will you marry me? I'm just kidding. That was really nice. So, so you're hiking a lot then?
Yes. Yes, I hike at least 5 and often closer to 7 days a week from May through October.
Wow. What's the longest you've ever went without taking a shower?
I had a very long hitch in the summer of 2009 where I was in the woods summit stewarding for I think 7 or 8 days in a row without a resupply. So I would say as a summit steward, probably 8 days without a shower. I also spent a few months on the Appalachian Trail and went a couple weeks without a shower there.
I was going to say 8 days is pretty normal for me, but that's good. Pretty ripe. Well, thank you very much, Julia. You can stay right here because we're going to bring Paul back on as well. But I want to take the opportunity to just say a couple things. One, the Wild Center, the exhibit that the Wild Center developed on the natural history of Whiteface Mountain is opening on June 20th. So please come by this season and check it out. It will be all over the mountain and in the surrounding area. It was developed in partnership with some organizations that I'm going to say right now. It's a list of acronyms, so bear with me. ANCA, the Adirondack North Country Association; ORDA, the Olympic Regional Development Authority; the Atmospheric Sciences Research Center, Adirondack Mountain Club, and then some other organizations as well. I want to thank Yvonne from EMS in Lake Placid for outfitting me with this extremely large coat to keep me warm throughout the summit cast. And of course, Julia Goren from the Adirondack Mountain Club, Paul Casson from the Atmospheric Sciences and Research Center. If you have any other questions or would like more information about the exhibit or Whiteface Mountain, please visit the corresponding organization websites: Adirondack Mountain Club, Atmospheric Research Sciences and Research Center, or Wild Center. Thank you everyone for watching. We appreciate the support, and we look forward to seeing you soon here on Whiteface. Take care.